So as I was saying earlier, I'm a psychiatry resident at UMKC. I'm a skeptic, student at large. My wife tells me I'm all around in my sky, so I just thought I'd. So we wanted to talk about the evolution of God. And the evolution of God, that's like, how do you have an evolution of God? That's like two words that really shouldn't be in the same sentence, you know. But so let's look at what does it even mean to use the word evolution. So I learned this early that the English not being my first language, I have to look up where the word comes from. So it comes from the word evolutio. It means unrolling of a book. If you remember the book from in the library in Alexandria, were stored like this, there were huge scrolls, and the books were then written. So that's what the books looked like till the Gutenberg had the printing press. So until we had this form of a book. So the word was the opening of what was once rolled up. And it appears in the present meaning of the word around 1620s. I looked up the word God, see where that comes from, and nobody's exactly sure where that comes from, but so there are several theories that where the word God comes from. But the most common one, they say that it's from the Sanskrit word that meant to invoke or to implore. And then later on, there's a German word, Gut, G-O-T, and that's where the word God comes from. The word religion that I looked up, it comes from religare, or to bind or fasten. And another one was the opposite of negligent. That's where the word negligent comes from. So it's like, it's the opposite of that word. So if it's, you are being more careful, opposite of negligent. So that's the religare. It's used in the current, the current meaning of the word that we understand it starts around 1300. And here's another word that is a root word for it. So here's the basic concept. So if you don't believe anything that I say, and you don't have to believe anything I say, that you take home is this: the world and its gods are not as static as it appears to us today. So we don't even use the name of the gods anymore, because there's only one God, and then we just say God, and then everybody knows who we are talking about. It wasn't always like that. It wasn't always like that. And you will see numerous examples of how that concept that we understand that today came to be. So the society is constantly evolving, and so is the concept of God and religion. So as the end of the biological evolution begins the social and cultural evolution. So as we are evolving socially and culturally, even though the biology of our body has not changed much in the last 30,000 years, we have grown tremendously socially and culturally. And so is our concept of God and religion has changed. I have had this conversation with my children about, about this as well. So it goes to the lifespan. So our lifespan is 70, 80 years, and then when we are born, we see that Christianity is a big monotheistic religion that's dominant. And so in terms of scale, it appears that it was always like this. It was always stable, just like the children may think that about the Tonight Show. So as the society's needs change, so does the character of the religion, and along with it, the character of God. So you have heard of this concept called meme, M-E-M-E. it's supposed to sound like a gene. The idea is very simple, that if a concept, in order for a concept to survive in your brain, in order for it to survive in the society, it must offer some sort of advantage, some sort of value to the brain that holds it. So if it doesn't offer any advantage, if it doesn't offer any value to the brain that holds it, it's not going to be residing in your brain. So I take it people here are atheists?
Yeah.
Except Josh? Okay. All right. So as you can see that this concept somehow is not serving any need to you. So it has not survived in your brain. But you can think of other people who are devoutly religious, and for whatever reason it is serving some need, whether real or perceived, for it to survive in their brain. Okay? And we will see that as we walk around. Here's another concept. Most new things have elements of old things in it. Now in 2003, when the first iPod came out, it could hold 400 songs. Ooh, I wanted one so badly. And it was ridiculously expensive, but it didn't come out of nowhere. Before then, there was a Walkman. I know, I mean the young people, you know, you guys know. So there was the Walkman. After that, there was this thing, it was called Galaxy. It had a huge hard drive, it was like about that big, and it could hold 1,000 songs. And it was a huge thing that you had to walk around with. It was called Galaxy. So before the iPod, so when something new and something more popular that comes along, and we think, wow, what did people do? No, there was always gradual process. It was a very gradual process. So even though it looks brand new, it has elements. It doesn't have to have everything. But there was a player that had a hard drive that was built in. There was a storage of music on a magnetic medium, and then you could play it back. Same concept from the Walkman, as it is in the iPod. The modern church would have you believe, the monotheistic would have you believe, that Abrahamic religion originated out of nothing, because that was the one true God that replaced the Canaanites, that replaced all the other ites, and brand new they started the new religion by wiping out everything else, and it was the one true religion, it was the one true God. It had nothing to do with the things that existed before. It was a brand new concept of monotheism, and that's the one true God. And we will see that that is not true. Anything that new that arises has elements of old thing in it. So we will see that the Abrahamic religion arose out of the organic milieu. That's a French word, means environment. Organic environment around us that it comes out of. So the basic template is the same. Take something existing and improve it so it fits the need. It meets the new niche it can fill. Let's look at the Mormonism. So there was this need for something local, something organic, and all of a sudden you could find a tie to the ancient Israel, but it has elements of new, Jesus coming to America, now something that we can relate to, and all of a sudden you take something existing and then meet the need. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the Garden of Eden was in Missouri? See how you take something old and then make the new, fit the new niche. Missourians, they're not going to make it to the Jerusalem anytime soon. You want to have something local, right? So you can always find something that's local. That's the basic concept. So let's look at I'm sure some of you have seen this. Here's hers, born on December 25th, born of a virgin, star in the east, adorned by 3 kings, teacher at 12, 12 disciples, 3000 BC. Mitra, again, same template exists, born of the virgin, December 5th, 12 disciples, performed miracles, dead for 3 days, resurrected, 1200 BC. This here is Krishna, again that similar story. And you could see that nothing that comes out from the organic environment is that new. It has elements of old in it. Here's the proof of evolution. So, right before our eye, the creationism is evolving. So that's what we started with. Now we are ending up with intelligent design. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we didn't have that concept. So how does that intelligent design then come about? As evolution then becomes more and more popular, nobody can deny the existence of DNA and commonality in this room that we all share of the DNA. So they then modify the theory. So I have a nurse that in my unit, and we argue with her. God first designed Neanderthal-like, and then he let them be. And then we evolved from that. So you're taking something existing, merging with the idea, you can't really refute it anymore, so you modify it. So you're taking something old, religion always evolving. So what is the idea? Take something old, make it into the new, that it meets the requirement of today. Okay? Here's one. Goes. So this is where our movement came along and finally got the Bible right. So here is a kid that says, Jesus is so lucky to have us. Right? So what is this concept? Here is a concept that refers to ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism. That tells you my way of doing things is right. Anybody have a friends that are very, very enthusiastic about barbecuing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? You have to boil the bratwurst with the onion and the beer before you cook it. And that's like, no, that's how you ruin the flavor. What you have to do is get up the night before, and he has this, like different way of barbecuing things. And then there are people who have their turkey recipes, yes? And if you ask your grandma, no, that's not how you do the turkey. So everybody thinks that it's their way of doing things is right. Why do we all feel that way? What if I was walking around with the underwear on my head? What would you think? It's a pledge week. To those of you, yeah. But what else would you think? Well, what's wrong with this idiot? Who invited him? He's walking around. Because, what is it? We all know the proper way of wearing underwear is inside the pants, right? Ethnocentrism. We will all experience this. So again, Xenophanes is given credit for this. So is it any wonder then that everybody's God looks like theirs? And they are the chosen people? It's like my children voting me Father of the Year. I mean, there's a double joke there, but you get the idea. Who else am I going to favor but my children? So I am the Israelites' God. They are the chosen people. Right? If you look, if there were another Sumerians, guess who were the chosen people? Yeah, the Sumerian God chose them to be the chosen people. Yeah, and the Hawaiian. Yeah, Hawaiians were the chosen people of the Hawaiian God, and so were the Indian. But ours was the one true God, actually. So, yeah. So here we go. Ethnocentrism, right? So let's look at the non-humans. The elephants then are able to recognize elephant remains, and then they show emotional response to the animal remains. They are able to, there is a myth, I've never found any data for it, but it says when the elephant is ready to die, they walk over to their grave and then they lie down when they die. And they have found some huge piles of elephant bones. There's no data really suggesting if that myth is true or not. But it is true that they recognize their own. There is a 6 or 8 minute video. I didn't put it in, not enough time. But you'll see that the chimpanzees, they cry. They try to figure out what is wrong with the baby that has died. Here we have a mother that knows that something is wrong with this baby, that it's not moving the way it is. She's walking around with the baby for several days till it starts smelling bad, and then they abandon it. So the only thing I want you to pay attention in this slide is to know that Neanderthals and the modern Homo sapiens coexisted. And there is also a lot of data that says they intermingled in the species as well. So that's the only thing to take away from this slide. Okay. So let's look. In the Paleolithic period, these are just some names. We're just going to skip it real quick. Proto-religion. Let's look at the proto-religion. Right around 30,000 years is the first time we are seeing. So in the non-human species, there was no religion as far as we can tell. Neanderthals are the first one then showing some sign of a symbolic behavior, some sort of a symbolic processing that could come close to what we call religion. Here they made use of a very sophisticated tool. They controlled fire. Just last month, there was some report that says they were sailing or took to the sea before the humans did. So they were navigating water before the Homo sapiens were navigating water. And they actually had a larger brain than the Homo sapiens did. Yeah. So they were able to hunt large animals. They planted food and made occasional symbolic and ornamental objects. And let's look at this. They're the first non-human that were practicing burial of the dead. Okay? But what was their meaning to that? We don't know. They deliberately buried their dead and marked their grave with offerings such as flowers. This is the first time we are seeing a symbolic meaning and a symbolic processing by a non-human brain. Later we will see that that's not true because other primates are able to do it. There is some Japanese researchers that show that is able to do math by touching the right key. You can add numbers, you can count from 1 to 10 in ascending order, descending order, and add numbers. So other non-human species are able to do symbolic processing.
What animal have they taught? The Japanese researchers taught what kind of animal?
I think it's a chimpanzee. I think it's a chimpanzee or orangutans. I'm not sure. But it's a higher primates that they are able to do it. You can see the YouTube video. There is one where he gets, like, every time he does ascending 1 through 10. So they show the keypad and he touches it, and they can do it. So how is it that we know that they were able to bury people and have symbolic meaning? So here's a grave that they found in France, and here is the one complete skeleton that was found. So notice the pasture that probably was wrapped in some sort of clothes. And the other thing that they found when they, if you have seen archaeologists when they're doing digging, they have the grid of strings, and that's how they coordinate, like there's a coordination for each physical space when they remove. So in a very small area, they could find a large concentration of pollen. So there's nothing here, and then in the small circle, there's a huge number. So that is then somehow proof that a flower was then deposited there. It's not a wild deposition of pollen. That's the find that it's like a positive proof that it's all concentrated in a little area. So flower had to be good. So this is the first time that we are seeing. Now, what might you think about why is it that they are doing it? Any speculation?
Repeating?
Why are they burying their dead?
Oh, what are they here?
Well, there's got to be some kind of concept of an afterlife or something
Exactly,
like that.
yeah.
That they need to be
Yeah.
provisioned for.
Yeah, so they know that this species, the specimen that was walking around and running around also was sleeping at night, right?
Mhm.
And then he would wake up and go through this cycle. But now he has slept and not waking up. So it's a possibility that someday he or she might. So what they would do is not just bury them with the flower, sometimes they would bury them with the tools that when they wake up they'll need. And some of the time that they buried them with the tools, they were so ornately decorated. So a lot of resources were sunk in that tool, in decorating it and making it. It's very, very valuable to give something like that up for no apparent reason. So there is some sort of a symbolic sacrifice on the part of the living to give up a tool that they made so much effort in making it, and then they bury it with the dead. So obviously there is an intended use at some later date. Here we see hybrid creatures. This is the first evidence of proto-religion. So this one is hard to tell, but if you could see that's a human-like posture. The person has a head of like a bull or something, but you can see it's a human-like posture. Still has animal-like legs, but it's not on all four. Okay. So here's another one. This one clearly has human-like feet, human-like hand, and a posture. So these are the hybrid animals. Clearly, these animals did not exist. So this is a symbolic presentation, symbolic representation of early god-like creature that they are thinking. So it has a hybrid, human. I mean, even look at the bones; they get it right, you know. And the posture is kind of upright, but not exactly upright. This one is about 30,000 years old. It's made from ivory, and it's a lion man. This one is clearly bipedal animal. Clearly a hybrid of human lion head. Early representation of spiritual creatures that we find. Here's another one. Here's another one with the bird-like features of the face. Again, they fly, have a spiritual, seeing it over here, we see a bird representation, but clearly this is some sort of a spiritual being with the human body and the bird. This is the fertility goddess that could be found from modern Afghanistan to all the way to France. This figures is very, very ubiquitous. You could see it in all sort of museums. It is found everywhere that they have dug up. Again, fertility goddess. So the hypothesis that these early proto-humans had some sort of symbolic supernatural beings, some supernatural concepts, but nothing else could be found. So it's like 30,000 years later, if they dig my body up and find this pen on me, they couldn't say anything about what I wrote or how I felt about things And that is how it is. We find these little objects and we try to tell. It's just like equivalent to finding a pen and try to predict what they wrote with the pen. Just not possible for us to know what it is that they believed. So let's look at the sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic was the earliest prehistoric human behavior that's said in hunter-gatherer society. What does it really mean? Sympathetic magic is, I do something over here to this object, and something over there something will happen over there. Kind of like a voodoo thing, you know. I'll stab, and that guy will die. It's a sympathetic magic. So here's the first concept then, that I can appeal to some sort of a supernatural thing for events to come out in my favor. Sympathetic magic. Then if you have a supernatural power that can affect the outcome, you must have then some way of getting your message to the supernatural beings. And one of the ways to do it is to use the shamans. The shamans then have the line. They have the line to talk to the supernatural. So we'll skip this one here. Here is early religious practices that we see. So here's the carbon dug. Do you see the handprint that's in the negative? So the way this was done was way, way deep in the cave that is not accessible very easily. They would then put the hand, load this pigment in a hollowed out bamboo, and blow it, and then it would make the imprint. The idea was that the supernatural beings live deep inside the stone, and you are able to then connect with them. And you are leaving your request, whatever that request is. So let's look at the cultural evolution. So as we see all those names, like I could never remember Australopithecus, Tavadopithecus, all those names. Similarly here we have the cultural evolution. So the most primitives were then the hunter-gatherer society. Next up was the horticultural base. These are pre-agrarian. So they're settling down, but they don't have a concept of ownership of the land yet. So they'll plant things will grow, they'll throw seeds and watch it grow. So there's not quite concept of agriculture just yet. And they're also doing the hunting. The chiefdom, these are more or less more settled down. Again, not transitioned into the ownership yet. Chiefdom, and then we have the city-state. The city-state is where we find the classical Greeks who lived in. So things like Athens, Marathon, where those cities were considered independent country, and they would have a war between the Athens and Sparta and things like that. So the city-states. One up from them is a national. So several city-states then get together and become national. So it's like Egypt, and Egyptian culture was to that level. It's considered national. And then we have a regional, so like 9 colonies, 13 colonies getting together, making a large nation. Then North American countries coming together, making a regional. And finally, the global is what we are right now in the cultural evolution. So this is the basic order of the cultural evolution. And we will see how the concept of God changes from one to next. So we are looking at Papua New Guinea, right over here. It's on the little north of Australia. And so I want you to remember, if you look in the map in the Bible, how big of an area does it depict? right, as far as the few cities and the few, because if you look at that rest of the movie, the terrain is so difficult. The maximum they can travel is 3 or 4 miles in a day. So the entire universe is that small. All the other people pretty much look like them, but they talk different. As you see, like in the little area, 700 languages that they speak. Yet they are able to communicate with each other a little bit. They wouldn't know who else is alive in the rest of the world. So they just share their daughter, giving her in marriage with somebody else in the nearby tribe, and that's how the gene pool is shared, so there's no incest really happening. So is it any wonder then that the God or the events that are occurring in the Bible is in the radius of what you can travel in reasonable time on the back of a camel? That is all your universe. They are not aware of Japan. They are not aware of Australia. So all events are local, and they're just fighting with the Mennonites and the Canaanites and the, yeah. And then all of a sudden, those are the God's just chosen people there. It's like, really, the whole universe and this dry piece of land is your promised land? How about Vegas, or Ireland?
Missouri.
Ireland done.
Yeah? Or Hawaii? Oh, come on.
Hawaii.
If I were God and I want to give something good to my chosen people, hell, I'll send them to Hawaii. Yeah. Hunter-gatherer society then, there is no recorded case of hunter-gatherer society that is purely monotheistic. Right after I put that, my friend Fred pointed out there was one. And there's always one. It's on the page 83 of his book. I have not researched it yet. Sorry, Fred. I said I would, but I didn't. Yeah. The Piraha. So I looked. I said, is there any other hunter-gatherer society that are atheists? And there it is. I found one. Here is a culture where their language restricts their thought process. Their language restricts their thought process. So if I say, like he pointed out, if there is no evidence, there is no way for me to communicate it. So I can say, Jesus forgives you. It's like, yeah, but did you see him forgive me? That's like, no. So there is no way then to explain that or even think of it. How does it happen? So then the language restricts your thought and how you communicate. So then you say, well, if you can only transfer the information that was directly heard or seen or deduced, how do you then transcend the time? And they have the concept of time that is very circular. So it's not linear time of a concept like 10,000 years ago. Well, nobody was there 10,000 years ago that they can tell. So the only thing they have then is this concept of immediate, a little immediate past, and little immediate future, and that's about it. So they live in the present. They live in the present. If they don't see it, it isn't there. So it gives you very, very interesting insight into how language then controls the one's thought process and about how one thinks about the world around them. When my wife and I talk in our Indian native languages, it's just impossible to carry on, is it not? Within seconds we break into English because it is so hard to express the American ideas in our language. It just doesn't work, does it? Now we try, and then if we do talk for a long time, there'll be things like the financial aid. There is no word for financial aid, Walmart, and so it's just hard to communicate. It's just not very efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's another concept that in the hunter-gatherer society, totemism. So this belief, as I showed you the pictures of half bird, half man, half lion, half man. So there's a relationship with the spiritual world, whether it's these hybrid things exist, the animal or plant, and that's where the term totem comes from, Obiwa word or toteman, where one's brother or sister or kin. So the spiritual beings in the other realm are half human, half bird, half man, half lion. So we have this kinship with the spiritual world. And that's the idea of having this idea of supernatural beings that exist. And we'll skip this one. The Iban of this Malaysia then, they have totemism tradition as well, where they have the helper and the protector of an animal. So they have this family spiritual animal that you would pray to, and they will guide you to it. Here is a totem of a fish that's your spiritual guide. This first systematic study of that proto-religion is done by this gentleman here, John Lubbock. He writes a book, The Origin of Civilization and the Primitive Condition of the Man. And notice that he writes about the time where the Darwin is doing his things. And he's a British guy, and the word savage, it has a negative connotation now, but at that time it just meant primitive and religion. And he felt there were great superstitions, and he was then measuring the primitive culture with the 18th, 17th century British rule. So he's measuring them. See, they're primitive, they're savage. Yes, if we go back to that time, we would call them primitive and savage. And this is his point of view. He is looking at the primitive religion and laughing at them, as opposed to looking at his own. The Edward Tyler is a little bit after him, and he's the first one considered the father of anthropological study of a religion. He is the first one to give the idea of the cultural evolutionism, that culture is constantly in a change, it's flux. And in his book, he defines the scientific study of anthropology, and he looks at the evolutionary theory of Charles Lyell at that time. His idea was that there was a functional basis of the development of society and religion. And he thought it was very universal. So he's the first pluralistic scientist, social scientist, that comes in. And what he suggested that it's a big departure from the Lubbock, the psychic unity of the mankind. What he really is telling us that biologically speaking, those hunter-gatherers that we saw that was filmed like 8 to 10 years ago, biologically speaking, they are just as modern as we are. Their liver makes the same enzymes, their cardiac system works exactly the same, they have exactly the same muscles as we have, all of their brains have same neurons that we have, so they are as modern biologically speaking as we are, so evolutionary speaking, they are different. Culturally, evolutionary speaking, they are different. Biologically, they are very, very modern. And Tyler's contribution was that he introduced the term animism. The idea was that this individual soul or an anima, I have to be careful how I say it, you know? Because, and natural manifestation into the common. So he was the first one to consider that this was the first stage of the development of religion. What does that mean we will see? That all objects have this spirit. And how does he think that the primitive culture came to that idea? The concept was that when you are asleep, your body isn't moving, so your spirit has left your body. Okay? It kind of makes sense that when you're sleeping, your spirit has left your body. And when you have dreams and you see your dead mother or any relative, their spirit is visiting you. That's how you get to see them. Okay? So this is the basic idea that how do you come up with this, the concept of animism. But then how does the can and the desk and the chair have spirit? How do you get that idea? But when you dream, do you not see chair? When you dream, do you not see a can? How do they come to you in your dream? So they too must possess a spirit. And that's the basic idea that it comes. That early humans then came up with this idea. Okay. So the early human equated the souls and that appear in the dreams and vision, and then we are calling it that. So that's the functionality. Yeah.
Where did the soul come in here?
The soul is just a different the term that we use. They use spirit, soul, the same concept. Same concept. And the inanimate objects also appear in the dream. They too have the spirit. And the death then is the departure of the spirit from the body. So that's where the very earliest form of religion. In Andaman Island, which is off the coast of India, they have this belief that you can't wake somebody up before, if they're sleeping, because if you wake up their body and their soul is still visiting somewhere, then that is not good. The ultimate belief then was that the spirit somehow survives the physical death. And that's how you see dead relatives in your dream, because it is their spirit then visiting you. And in some system then, the spirit is also passed into an easier world of an abundant resources. Why is this concept coming along? This is what we are in modern days would call heaven. Why is that concept evolving?
There's not just fear of lack of resources
Exactly.
during the physical life.
Yeah, exactly. So harder, the more severe the hardship, the greater the rewards of the afterlife is going to be. Since it is so hard for me to find good apples, I'm sure when I die, I'll have access to that.
It's a different energy as well. It's a different energy. Death versus being alive. Sleeping versus being alive.
Mm-hmm. Then, so hunter-gatherer gods come in different flavors. That's why I put different color there. Supernatural being type 1. First one is the elemental spirit. The Klamath, or the Native Americans, now in Oregon, they have the clouds obscure the moon. It could mean the muash. The south wind was trying to kill the moon. Because here, now we are giving animalistic properties to natural elements. So the second type of gods were puppeteers. These are the wind. They would believe that the wind was emitted from a flexible dwarf woman. She would be asked to blow off the mosquitoes from the nearby Pelican Bay. So now, first that the gods were the element themselves. The second was the god could control the elements, like the wind and the water and the rain. And the type 3 are the organic spirits that they're alive and have a many supernatural power. So some birds could make the snow and the fog and etc. The ancestral spirit were the fourth kind. The ancestral spirit in the Far East, that they would have the whole 15 days of month where we would give offerings and feasts to our ancestors' spirits so they can come and guide us. Then the final one is the high God. It does not control the other gods, but it's more important than the other gods. For example, Klamath, it is the tribe Klamath, their god is Kamukamat, who created the world and inhabited sun and created Klamath people from a purple berry and sustained them. So Kamukamat's chosen peoples are who? Klamath. So for some reason, if the Klamath people had discovered an A-bomb during that time, we would all be Kamukamatians. Okay? Because they would have controlled politically yeah. So from one type of gods to another. So it is conceivable that the spirit of an individual tree can be transformed into the spirit of a whole bunch of trees. So when you are limited to 3 or 300 square feet of forest, you could name each tree. This is Bob, David, this is Bruce. You could have a name for each tree. And then they would have a spirit. But then as the radius increases, you would have a spirit for the trees in general. So there's a spirit that controls all trees. That the religion does not exist for them. So what does that mean? So if you ask those guys, they had a spirit that created the whole universe, and that's what it is. So when I was growing up, and the religion really didn't exist because it's like, that's your everyday thing. So my mom would make lunch, and it was my job to then, before I would eat it, I have to offer it to the God, but she's not done cooking, but then I have to go to school, so it's like, well, I'm getting late, and it's like, well, you can't eat because the God didn't eat yet. It's like, well, what do you want to do? So I tell you what, I'm going to take a bunch of rice and put it in the bowl, and you eat from the other bowl. It's like, well, what about giving it to the God? Well, I took it out for him, so I'll give it to him later, you can eat. So, like everything revolves around, so it's not like God's, it's not a religion, it's like the way of your life. Everything you do, it's all, it's encompassed, it's all in one. And it's just hard to describe life that did not involve religion element in it. It's just not possible to grow in that society and not be affected by it. And she doesn't like it when I use this example. Her brother is getting ready to come to America, and he has all these things to do. Get the passport ready, and get this certificate, and get that certificate. But what does he have to do first? Go to the village and first pray to the ancestral mothers and all this. Like, dude, get your paperwork first. Like, no, I have to go all this. But you don't have money, you don't have time. No, send me money, I have to go do this. Because if I don't pray, and if I don't do this, then I won't get the visa. It's like, okay, go do your thing. Yeah. So if you ask them, what is your religion? They're like, what do you mean? It's not a religion, I mean, this is what we do. And here he says, this you have seen before, yes? The primitive hunter-gatherer society does not have this problem with their God. You know why?
Because bad stuff happens.
No, their gods is people-like.
Oh, okay.
Their God are people-like. They are not the one supreme God that's malevolent. That God that we, Yahweh, that we call, the God now, they don't have a problem because look some of the things that they do. Their gods are single, powerful, good and moral, but they have a human-like nature. What does that mean? That he's made in the man's image with all the human attributes. He harbors pretty resentment the guy, I skipped his name, of his handsome adopted son Aishish and stole his clothes. So then, and that was not bad enough, he's always trying to seduce Aishish's wives. And that's nothing compared to Gaona, the Kung, I have to be able to do this, Kungachik's high god, who raped his son's wife and ate 2 of his brother-in-law. So that's very, those are gods that are very much like them. So they don't have a problem with morality, because their God is not moral, their God is just there. Why? Because he is made in their image. Because he's made in their image. Then what about the morality? Well, it's not a big concern in the hunter-gatherer society. The enforcing of the appropriate behavior takes care of itself. Did you see in that picture he was making his own axe? Mm-hmm. If the neighbor guy came and stole his axe, where is he going to hide it? When is he going to use it? It's like, hey, isn't that Bob's axe? So there's no point in stealing anything. There are no property markers. If you find a bird, you hunt it, you bring it back. That's nobody's bird. There are no property markers. There's no problem with the morality. And at the most, there are 30 to 40 people in the village. There are no strangers. And the reciprocal altruism and kinship selection are the 2 mechanisms by which you don't need law enforcement. Reciprocal altruism is, hey, I'm out of water. Can I get some of your Mountain Dew? And then next day, when Austin is out of Mountain Dew, I can give him some of my water if he needed to. But if he refuses to give me some Mountain Dew today, hey, I'll remember. Reciprocal altruism. This was so true growing up. We lived in this little area, and this is the only way we could all survive. When we didn't have kerosene, the only way to do it is go to your neighbor's house with a cup and say, hey, can we get some kerosene? And then they'll come over and say, hey, can we get some milk? And then you have to give some, and then we have a book. It's like, 4th January, we give kerosene. 8th February, we got back some milk. And we kind of keep track of who's owing who what. And that was the only way you could do it. The kinship selection is, he's my cousin. If he doesn't pay me back, it's okay, it's a family. So the basic concept now evolves. There are supernatural forces at work, and there must be a way to appeal to these controllers of the force. How? Well, there is a force that controls lives of many modern Americans in this room. Anybody want to name the force? It's called the stock market. Does it not control your 401k? Yes, whether you can retire at 62 or 82, directly related to the stock market. And we can relate to this force that affect our future availability. That's going to determine if you could retire in Alabama, Florida. Where you're going to retire depends on your 401k, what stocks you bought. So even if you don't own any stock, the economy in general can affect your access to the resources, job availability, gas and food prices. No need for me to convince anybody. Insight into this force. Complete this sentence.
The world doesn't.
Yeah. Some people are able to complete it. Young people, not so much. He was a stock analyst. Do we know this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, young people know him. He's the mad money at the. He gets every freaking thing wrong.
Yeah.
He's still
He's
giving.
still on TV.
Yeah, he's still on TV, giving you advice, right?
And
It's
not taking
everything.
his own.
You're better off throwing a dart on a piece of paper and selecting it. Yet, what do we do? What do we do? We go to people who have insight into that supernatural force. Is it any wonder that people go to the priest and shamanism to control? As long as there is a supernatural forces that are amenable to influences, I can get them to influence.
Yeah.
If there is an influence, if I can get to the right agent, I can control the outcome in my, I can control the outcome in my favor. Right? Does it make sense? You have to believe, first of all, there is a supernatural force, and he can control the outcome, and if I can reach that force, then I can control. And who is the best agent? Yeah, who is the best agent to reach the supernatural? Depends on who your, right? Depends on who your agent happens to be. One is a very handsome guy with a nice hat. The other one is Pope. Good or evil? Functionalist. Religion serves, this is what the functionalists believe. The religion serves social function and it is good. And here are the Marxists or the cynical that says the only single interest the religion serves is religion. It serves nobody else but themselves. The Inuit, we used to call them Eskimos, but they're not, they don't like. I don't think there's any word like Eskimos. So Inuit shaman serves single interest, and that is themselves. The best way to please the goddess is to have sex with the shaman. So what do you say? Your husband didn't catch any fish? Why don't you come and see me sometimes? Yeah, so the shaman can control it, okay? So whose interest is he really serving? You just have to find the right agent. You just have to find the right agent, whatever it is that needs. Shamanism then is the next step in the evolution of God. Here is the way to access the supernatural forces and influence the outcome. You can cure sickness. In Polynesia, in the Hawaii area, these are some of the gods. These are some of their gods. So everyone's is the right religion, and nobody's wants to. The chiefdom. So this is, look at the next one, okay? The chiefdom. So chiefdom is now we're having the semi-agrarian society that we're calling it a horticultural society. Not a full-scale agrarian. They're not farming yet. They raise cattle. They do fish. They grow some fruit, vegetables in a small garden. Now we see the labor specialization occurring in the society. Now if you need, in the chiefdom when we were living, if you see that the clips that I showed you, that one guy did everything. He chopped the tree, he made the house, he hunts, he makes his tool, he cuts his own hair, he grows his thing. Everything he needs, he's able to do. His wives are able to do, his children are able to do. You don't go to Walmart and get flour to make the bread. You have to go and cut down the tree, open up make the pulp, make your own bread. Now in the chiefdom, you have a labor specialization. So you see, some are making clothes, vessels, priests that are builders, that are canoe makers, specialization of labor. So you grow tomato, I'll grow potato, we'll exchange it. I can go somewhere, buy some shoes, give some of my potatoes and tomatoes, and exchange. Specialization of labor. James Cook, when he visited the Polynesian island in 1760, he thought that it was a waste of a human race. In Tahiti, when he was visiting a temple, he counted 49 human skulls. They were not weathered, so he figured that they must have died recently. And he found the 50th corpse was just offered up. His eye was plucked out and placed on a plantain leaf. And the gods then dominated every aspect of life. There was not a single action, enterprise, event that did not was submitted to the god. And then in the book, he goes on to describe making of a canoe. So the priest would have to go sleep under the tree, and if he got a bad dream, that's not a good tree to cut down. He would then have to move on to another tree, sleep underneath for several days. If he got a good dream, that's a good tree, his job is done. He's a tree selection priest. Then the other priest comes and he blesses the tree. Then they have a feast, they have a coconut and a pig, and then they cook and they have this whole feast, they offer it to the god. And then God only eats the spiritual part of the pig and the coconut. So the priest and the rest of the people get to eat what's left over. Then they would cut down the tree, make the canoe. When the canoe is made, another priest comes. He prays to another god. So there is this conveyor belt of gods that the canoe passes through. And eventually the canoe is then put in the ocean. And at that time, another god is prayed to, and there is a feast. So now there is a specialization of gods. Okay? There's no difference between the political and religious. The rulers have a special connection to the divine. The Tangaroa, or Tangarora, or Tangaboa, or Taurora, he played a major role in the creation of the island. The variation of the themes on a different island, it was the same god, but he played different role in the creation of the. And that is how the Darwin found the variation in the finches in the different island. Here's the different island have a variation of the gods. What role did the Tangaroa play? Here, depends on which island you were born. Some places he lifted up the sky from the sea. In the other, he brought the islands out of the deep sea. In Samoa, he created the humanity. In this other island, he was just sitting by the feet of another god. And just as the labor land was specialized in the society, so it is in the divine world. Here is the table of the Polynesian god. Here is Mao, is a trickster, a god hero. Oro is a war god. And here's the god of the wind and the storm, god of forest. So is the society now specializing? So is the divine world specializing. You see what I mean by the cultural evolution, and the evolution of divine spirit goes in hand in hand. Here are some more specialist gods. God of the sea, god of the wind, fishermen, net makers, navigators. More than a dozen gods of agriculture, because it is so important that it must have like a dozen gods. Singers and actors, now they have their own deities. The gods, well, how do you tell? It's a doctor or a god? The gods of hairdressers, combers, transgender god, half male, half female. I always thought it was the upper lower half, but apparently it's not. Here's another transgender god. And this is a universal concept. If you look in a different society, different culture, you will find this specialization of God as the cultural evolution moves along. Here is a goddess. She was of art and music. She is the one you would pray to if you were playing any musical instrument. If you were not doing so good in math, you would pray to this particular god. And here is the god of bodybuilding and exercise. Here is a god, they have, So I'm not sure how that came about. Even thieves have the god. Then the concept of tapu, that's where the word taboo comes from, and mana. These are two opposite concepts. The mana then, it means the divine power. In south side of Chicago, they would have called it juice, or the inner city gang term, or a mojo. So you have this mana. So in the prison, if you kill somebody, then you are retired. If you steal your own shirt, and, like OJ would have gone to the jail for stealing his own shirt, and he would probably say, "But I killed 2 people!" But you don't have any mana there. Ultimate mana then is here in Natchez, which is the present day Mississippi, the chief was also the brother of the son. Now, isn't that convenient? Because if you're a chief and you also happen to be the son's brother, wow, that's ultimate juice you have, that's an ultimate power. When he passed away, several of his subjects ate enough tobacco to lose consciousness, then they were killed and buried with him. Yeah, I mean that's some super juice, that superpower that you carry. The law enforcement, at this phase of the Cultural Revolution, justice is delivered by the chief and their administrator. But the delivery of the punishment is still left up to the victim's family. In Waziristan, I thought I had a map, but I don't. In Waziristan, it's like a state in Pakistan. Guy raped neighbor's daughter. So they took him to the chiefdom court. It's not any official government-run legal system there. It's chiefdom. And all the chiefs got together of the local tribes, and they decided that since two brothers, since this guy raped the neighbor's daughter, the victim's brother could rape perpetrator's sister. It makes sense to the chief in the chiefdom. So who delivers the punishment to me or the perpetrator? The victim's brother then will rape the perpetrator's sister. Yeah. That's the chiefdom. This is like in 2007 or 2008. We're not talking like 1920s.
Question, I thought in Pakistan, Waziristan's actually federally administered tribal areas.
Still tribal area though.
So it's got different law, because usually if a woman is raped, she's just killed.
Well, I'm sure that they have that. Or he would have to marry her.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, that's another option you have. During chiefdom stage, there were property markers. So why has the religion survived the earlier society? Remember I was telling you, a mean that does not offer any advantage will perish. And the religion in a chiefdom offered a lot of protection against the everyday worries. So the chiefdom and their religious institution offered their own form of a social security. They took care of the widows and orphans. When the fishing parties returned, those who did not come back with a huge catch, all the other parties gave part of the catch to the chief, and then chief would distribute to the others who didn't have any. So it was a form of a tax that they all paid, and then if you came back without any catch, you could receive some from the abandoned catch. Then the way to feel secure about uncertainty, that in the world that creates anxiety, so religion then offers you that peace. Right? You don't know what will happen to you when you die, but if you gave so much to the church, the Pope will make sure you go to the heaven. The Pope will make sure you go to the heaven. So here is the evening prayer. What is he worried about? This night, because he's sleeping outside, he's worried about the snake. He's worried about wild animals, eating and killing him. So that is what he's praying to the God. If you are betting $1,000 on a Super Bowl, what are you praying for?
I guess the winning.
The right team to win, yeah. So then the prayer then depends on the things that's causing the anxiety. Here the anxiety is, am I going to make it through the night? And praying to the God, at least you are reasonably assured in your own mind, if nothing else, that since you have done nothing wrong, God's going to look after you for the night. And things in the mirror are not real. When you look in the mirror, it's not real. It's an imaginary image, isn't it? But it affects which lipstick are you going to choose. Not that I choose any lipstick. But you know that things in the mirror affect what's happening in the reality. Same is the true then. What is happening in the society reflects in the religion. What is happening in the religion is then reflected back in the society. Make sense? It evolves then with the cultural evolution. As things on the outside evolve, things in the mirrors evolve. And as the things in the mirrors evolve, things in the outside evolve. But what came first? Things on the outside came first. Does it make sense? Not the other way around. Society in turn changes the religion. Religion changes the society, and the society in turn changes the religion. Change is then inevitable. When an institution is too large, it has inertia. So religion starts out like any other institute, serving some sort of need for the society. When the institute gets so large, the society serves the institution. Do any of you go to the DMV? How many of you feel served by them? Yeah? IRS was created for what purpose? To serve the people. How many people in this room feel served by the IRS?
Serve that.
Served in a different sense. Served and in subpoena served.
I have a street to drive home on tonight.
That's true.
I didn't build it.
No, I understand. So it's there for serving,
Correct.
but in the end, when the institute gets so large, the inertia that when you try to change the institute, you can't.
That's a less effective,
You can't. You end up serving the institute. Here I'm referring to, of course, religion. Religion was there at one time to serve the need of the humanity, but now the humanity ends up serving the religion. Here is the change. School segregation banned. Here's another one. Race mixing is wrong.
Does not say it's communism?
Yeah,
Yes, that's
Yes, it does.
Nice.
Or Antichrist.
Yeah. Yeah. So when the critical mass is attained, then the change can come slowly. Or it can be punctuated by a catastrophe. But the change then is inevitable part of evolution. Change is then inevitable part of evolution. Only thing that changes is what happens in the society. Okay? 100 years ago, God would have hated witches. But today, witches are no longer we believe in. Conveniently, God doesn't hate them anymore. But God hates. Isn't it interesting that God wants the same thing He wants? Yeah. But it will change, either slowly or with the catastrophe. Things will definitely change because the change makes the evolution. It is just inevitable. And what is it that we have to do then as a free thinker in this role? It is to initiate the change, to bring the change. Yes?
You say things will change, but you're not saying that things will always change for the better.
No, I'm not
No.
saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that they will change. And then while they are changing, here's an example. When Hosni Mubarak left,
Yeah.
well, left is a euphemism, but when he was gone, we were hoping for some change in Egypt. Who wins the election? The Brotherhood.
Yeah.
The Brotherhood. Change it doesn't always mean good. When the Iranian Revolution happened, Ayatollah came. Yeah. If you're not careful, Ayatollah Santorum. Skeptical. That is why the people in this room are important. That is why people in this room are important. To have that face. To have that face when somebody tells you God hates liberals. God hates fags. God hates atheists. God hates lesbians. Well, I know you're not lesbian, but in a way, we're both. Yeah, so look at this. This is then what we have to do, because resistance is going to be futile.
Well, you're not saying that the next president's gonna be a Mormon, are you?
It depends people in this room. It depends people in the whole republic. What do we do? But if we don't do anything, it is possible.
There will not be an atheist president or agnostic president, probably not.
No,
lifetime.
we had it. We had atheist president, Thomas Jefferson.
I said in our lifetimes. You can go
Okay,
back in
okay,
time.
yeah,
So-
yeah. Because you know why? Because here how it works. First, you never question anything I tell you. See? Yeah. So I'm just asking you, any questions? No. See, you never question anything. Any questions? See how it works? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm curious about, for instance, Socrates is an example of Western culture, iconoclast who fought against the dominant ethos of the time. Is there an equivalent type of historical figure in the Indian culture, that people are in that Hindu culture, that, or something along of equivalent?
Oh yeah. There was one. His name was Ramakrishna Paramahans, and what they believed in, that when husband died, the wife had to burn with him, because he's gonna need somebody to cook for him.
Yeah.
So she had to burn with him, whether she wanted to cook for him or not. And they would just throw her in the fire when the husband.
Alive?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but when you can't kill her, that would be uncivilized. Yeah. Jeez. So you couldn't kill her, because then you would be killing her. But if you just throw her in the fire, she's just a company. Yeah. So then he came out and he said, well, we'll stop it, And then he went in, and all the Hindus were up in the arms, and it's like, well, this is how we have always done it. And then finally, the Britishers were just happened to be taking over at the time, and they passed the law and they enforced it. But until then, they did it. Growing up, I remember when I was 8 or 9 years old, some woman actually did it, and then she became goddess overnight. And it was in all the newspapers, and everybody was talking about it. But I don't know what the story was. So there are always people like that they stand up and they say this is nonsense,
And so is he looked upon as if with favor in the culture?
Most people wouldn't even know him, because they'll know more about Hannah Montana than they know about anything else. But we studied it when I was growing up. But my cousins and their children, they come, I ask them, they don't know. They know more about the American popular culture. They know all about Oprah, and you know about Sally Jesse, Raphael, and you know about things like that, then yeah.
I find the concept of the evolution of the concept of the soul really interesting, mainly because the root of that word is breath. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how did we kind of codify that concept that every person has a soul, and then what's the difference between in Western religions where the soul is used just once, where in the Hindu and the Buddhist traditions, there's a reanimation of the soul.
Recycle.
Recycle the soul.
Yeah, very interesting question that you asked. So let's think about this. When my sister's mother-in-law died, they asked this priest to come and give a talk. Now, while the priest is talking, I can tell that first of all, he's priest. Second of all, he's Indian priest. He doesn't speak in English, and he's going to do this in our native language, and he's not very educated, and he's just there talking, and he's ad-libbing this. So he's going. So he starts with the thought, and then paints himself in a corner, and you can tell that he has not thought this through. And he starts with this concept of soul, then returning. Okay. So as he's thinking it out logically, he is going in the numbers game. And I knew he was going to end up in trouble. Because pretty soon he's like, so there were 100,000 people 100,000 years ago, there are 7 billion now.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
So there is an imbalance of number of soul. Are you creating the soul out of nothing? But Brahma said that the soul cannot be created or destroyed. So all of a sudden you got a 7 billion soul, but at one time you didn't. And then, so where is this oversupply of souls that are coming from? And does that mean that if they didn't reach nirvana, that means there is a reverse nirvana happening, because the ultimate goal of the soul is to get out of the birth-life cycle, but nobody's really getting out, but they're getting in because it's the 7 billion. And it's like, okay, explain it. Go ahead. And then he goes, so let us all praise how he ends. So there is this problem with that theory, because what we it may have worked when you only knew 200 people in the whole world. Because you and then Bob and Bob's family and Jeffrey over there, that's all the people you know, it works. Because number of people are about the same. But in globalization, now we run into this concept of durable soul, the reincarnation of the soul. Hell, that's got to be a factory somewhere in China making souls, I'm telling you. Because we just have way too many souls that we can account for. Unless every cockroach then incarnates as a human, but then we should be out of cockroaches. You see the problem? And yeah, it was very interesting to watch him paint himself in the corner. It's like, dude, you got to think this thing through before you get up. That's why there is this PowerPoint. You put the ideas down, and don't be just getting up and editing shit.
And that's what I have.
Library will close in 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
When I talk to theists and they talk about the soul and what happens after you die, that's one of the things that I try and focus in on, is where did this idea of soul come from?
Right. And why is there a gate at the heaven? What, the people sneaking in at night?
They're trying to get out.
Oh, get out. And this is like unlimited real estate? Because all the souls are going to be going sometime, 7 billion of them.
The gate
They want to keep you scared. I mean, if you're going to go to heaven, you can do anything you want. Fear is a big part of it.
And if heaven is so wonderful, why does the Pope need the Popal bill? Just get that right away, man. You know, like,
Yeah. Oh, well, earlier you were talking about like that some of these proto-religious types of signs started appearing no more than 30,000 years ago. So, and some of them were like burying the dead, leaving their tools with them, and so forth, leaving flowers. Do you think that, like, even saying that is proto-religious might be like falling into our own trap by ascribing our modern ideas?
absolutely.
I mean, really,
Absolutely, because remember as I was giving example, because if you find my pen,
yeah.
you couldn't tell what I was thinking or writing. So the idea is that the only conclusion that could be reliably drawn from it is symbolic representation. That's the only supportable conclusion that we can draw.
Well, as you're saying that,
Yeah.
I had a couple of thoughts.
Yeah.
One was that, well, you know, even quadrupeds present some varying sorts of quasi-emotional response. You know,
Mhm.
sadness
Yeah, we saw the elephant, we
and
saw the
like-
chimpanzees.
Yeah, chimpanzees. And so, I mean, should we for sure ascribe these proto-religious purposes to this kind of stuff? When, I mean, it could just be, I'm sad, I miss this person, you know, and dead things stink, and dead things attract dangerous animals, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna bury it.
No,
Yeah.
that is true, but the burying part then, if it's burying, if it's a disposable method, yes, I get it. But you're going to dispose something because it's no longer needed or unwanted or it's a nuisance or if it's bothersome, you will not bury with it a prized possession. You will not bury with it a prized possession. So if they prepare this tool that is ornately decorated, it's very valuable, they have invested lots of hours into making it, and then making it into a pasture.
So if the
It's a
elephants-
symbolic representation.
Okay, when they pulled leaves off of trees and then put a palm over some bones, then we could say, well, maybe
It was a
there's some
disposal.
religious.
I can see that as
Yeah.
being
It's
a
a
normal
disposal.
emotional response.
But you're so
but-
correct, because it's just a conjecture that we are drawing
Yeah.
based on our own behavior,
Mhm.
right? That we are saying, if you are going to bury something that's valuable to you, perhaps there is a thought behind it. It's likely that there wasn't any thought, okay? It's just like finding my pen. It's like maybe he was an idiot and he only used it to scribble things. Maybe he didn't write the Bible at all. Or, you know, like, it's just the instrument. So when you find an artifact, there's no proof. That's why it's not a hard science, and it's a soft science. And it's a lot of conjecture, I'll give you that, absolutely. It's just the idea is to take away, is that there is a symbolic representation. What is the representation here? The representation that that person might find this prized object useful one day is the thought. Was that the thought? There's no way of knowing.
Had to start somewhere.
Yeah. So it's purely conjecture. But it's a good conjecture. Out of all the conjectures you have to draw,
It's one of the better.
that it's a good one. Rather than saying, he did it, it's like, well, here's some proof that body was done like that, there was a flower, there were some clothes nearby, there were some precious objects that were buried with it. Maybe there was some thought behind it. There was some sort of a symbolism, some sort of a symbolic representation of what they thought might happen. No way of knowing it for sure, absolutely. It's not a science at all, in the sense that we call it science.
My question is more historical.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have the timeline right, but apparently the Mohenjo-daro in the Indus Valley traded with the Sumerians going back thousands of
Yeah,
years.
absolutely. That was the fertility goddess that I showed. That goddess shows up during that entire route from the India-Pakistan region now,
Right.
all the way to the modern Greece. It shows up
So
during that route that fertility statues are found.
Right. So my question is, those cultures probably influence the religion.
Absolutely.
And so the Egyptian and the Mesopotamian and the Hittites probably influenced each
Yeah,
other.
that's-
And
that-
Israel was in the middle.
Yeah, that was my part two.
The question I have
Yeah.
is how isolated was Israel if they were at the crossroads?
It was not isolated at all, and we will see it, that just as we saw up to the chiefdom, after that I have the state society, and the national society, and then the regional. And when you see the regional, you will see that when the two cities fought, the Alexander the Great was able to do so well, not because he had the most strongest, most advanced army, but when he took over a city, one of the first things he would do is go to their temple and pray to their God. It pissed off all the other Greeks that he was carrying with them, but it was so easy for them to win the hearts and mind of that he conquered. What was the standard operating procedure at the time? If you conquered a city, you could kill them. Rummage and pillage. I don't know what a pillaging is, but they were doing a lot of
That's
pillaging.
plunder.
Yeah, plundering and
Yeah.
pillaging. Yeah, you know what I mean? But here's Alexander the Great. He changes things. He goes, oh, I'm going to go to the temple and pray to their God. And so that was one of the way that the polytheism was the rule. That's what I was showing in my second part, that the polytheism was the rule. The ancient Israelites were not monotheistic, they were polytheistic. The ancient Muslims were not monotheistic, they were polytheistic. Polytheism was the rule until the 8th century, and we will see lots of data, lots of archaeological support to say that. By this time we have a lot less conjecture because we have things that are more than artifacts that survive. We have things that are written down. Things, so when something is said in the Bible, if you could find another piece of artifact elsewhere to corroborate with what is said there, and then you have some data that you can go by. Yeah, so absolutely, that's my part two, where we take from the Greek and we leave the chiefdoms out, and then we go to the modern religion, how it comes about. The evolution then continues with the consolidation. As the cities get larger, so the gods get smaller. As the power gets condensed into few hands, so does the divinity gets condensed into few gods. Eventually then divinity gets condensed into one God. And that happens to be the God that the, what's his name? The Constantinople has a seizure and sees the Jesus. Had he seen Mithra? Had he seen Brahma? Yeah. but life
John
would be-
Smith? You talking about Mormons?
No.
No. Constantinople, when he adopts the Christianity as a Roman Empire religion.
Okay, you're talking about Constantine.
Yeah, so that is a part of a neurological disorder.
Right.
He has a seizure and he sees something. I have people that come into my yard and they talk to God and I lock them up and I give them hell dog. 2,000 years ago, yeah, we started a religion. You know, it's like, well, I saw the burning bush. They're like, why didn't you pour some water on it, man? You know, it's like, yeah, and so it's a religion. Yeah. If somebody, if how they say it, if you talk to God, it's a prayer, but God talks to you, it's schizophrenia. Right? So if the God then not only he talks to you, he gives you tablets from stone. Why wouldn't he give him a piece of paper with the nice blue coloring? God, I mean, he invented the whole universe. Could he not do a pen and paper? Could he not? And then why would he have to go to the Garden of Eden and say, hey Adam, where are you? Hey, I created you, man. I can find your ass in that garden, you know? Yeah, so you'll see later in the evolution that he changes, God changes from being more human-like, asking where Adam is hiding, to ever knowing. And then he, as the time goes by, as the culture evolves, he becomes more and more distant, more hands-off God. And God starts working mysteriously. He wasn't so mysterious before. He was reaching out taking the rib out of the Adam and making Jane, Eve. Very hands-on guy, right? Very hands-on guy. And let's think about it. If you could make Adam from
Library
nothing
will close in 5
and
minutes.
make her out of your rib, why you gotta
Make
knock
sure
up Mary to have
the
Jesus?
doors will shut down to the circulation
I don't
test.
get it.
All computers in the DVD dispenser will shut down at 9 o'clock.
Well, that's my spiel, folks.